Yes, we are up and running, so we could start, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. Good morning if you're dialing in from further afield. Welcome to this panel discussion where we're going to be talking about some of the financial services trends in client authentication. So I'm Catherine Woods. I'm going to be moderating the panel today, but my day job is leading on retail banking communications at Standard Chartered. So joining me on the panel are Zia Hayat. Zia, if you could give a wave so people know who you are. So Zia is chairman and CEO of a company called CallSign. And this is a company that aims to help businesses keep the digital identities of employees and customers safe as well as verified, so that they can make customer buying journeys as frictionless as possible. Next up, we have Paul Beresford. Hi, Paul. Paul is our Global Head of Technology for Retail and Virtual Banking at Standard Chartered. He's also leading our IT transformation with Agile, automation, APIs, cloud, and innovation. And finally, welcome to Pedro. Pedro Sousa is also from Standard Chartered, and he's our Global Head of Digital Commerce. So Pedro has global experience in transformational cross-platform innovation, having worked across Europe, Middle East, North Africa, and Asia in both strategic and hands-on roles. So before we kick off with some of the Q&A, I thought I'd set the tone with a statistic. And so did you know that last year, every 14 seconds, an organization fell victim to a ransomware attack? And if you think that's bad, it's predicted to be every 11 seconds next year at a cost of $20 billion. So making sure that you know who you're talking to is who they say they are has never been more critical. And it's not just your existing clients as they transact. The account opening process is a critical moment in any client journey and one that can make or break a relationship. So what we're going to do today is explore some of the challenges, opportunities and trends in this space, starting with fraud. So as most of you will know, the financial industry has always faced significant fraud risk, and it's definitely been heightened with the ongoing pandemic. So Paul and Pedro, perhaps if I could direct this question to you. How do you see banks as well as challengers responding to this threat, as it is the new normal now? Maybe Paul, if you want to go first.
Sure. Well, so fraud is always a concern for financial services wherever there is payments involved, or actually all the way across the financial services product suite. And it's true, the pandemic has accelerated digital across all industries, or many industries, and financial services is included there. And with more digital adoption, fraud vectors like phishing, social engineering, or other vectors are more prevalent, or can be more prevalent. Traditionally, to resolve or to better identify a customer during and to resolve the risk of fraud, the industry started at things such as two-factor, so something you own, something you know. That traditionally started in many cases with SMS and then has moved to device finding and soft tokens. However, now as an industry, we need to be more sophisticated, both to burn down that risk as well as reducing the friction to our customers. And that higher sophistication is through, in addition to something that you own and something you know, it is where are you? What's your geolocation? What's your behaviours of logging in? How do you use your device? And can we use? How do we use that information as either additional scoring to step up a customer and create those more and satisfy those more risky transactions, or to replace some of the other factors and ensure that the customer friction is light as possible while being as secure as possible. So I do think this is a new normal. The digital adoption is unlikely to roll back, so that the continued focus will have to continue to sit with us. Pedro, do you want to add on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. Look, I think, before we talk about what banks and challenger banks and fintechs need to do, we really need to give a step back and think about the customers, right? And we are very much doing that on a daily basis. We're doing research with our customers. And we know that this year has been a game changer for everyone around the world. E-commerce sales this year in the US alone are up 40%. Consumer behavior is changing dramatically. Digital payments are up 20+% this year. So this is the new norm, right? And as you know, we have done a recent study with our customers across 12 countries, where we asked, about their behaviors, their intentions, their concerns, and their expectations, right? And what came out is that, customers are more used than ever to digital payments. So 50% of them or thereabout are saying that they feel more comfortable now with digital payments than they were before. And 2/3 of them think that, this is the way forward in the next decade. This will shift completely to digital. Now, this creates a new paradigm for all of us in the industry, because we need to prepare ourselves to support that new lifestyle. And customers expect things to be safe, things to be fast, things to be super convenient. And we have been working hard on all those fronts, right? On both authentication, biometrics, and behavioral analytics. And is how we came across with CallSign, actually.
Thanks, Pedro. Thanks, Paul. So Zia, maybe you could share a little bit more around how organizations, such as yourself, such as CallSign, how are you helping both mitigate the risk for banks and fintechs while, I guess, to Pedro's point, at the same time protecting that client experience?
Yeah. So I guess going back to some of the points that Paul and Pedro have made, Catherine, around the fact that the world has accelerated its move towards virtual or digital. If you look at the way in which we all identify ourselves or identified ourselves in the real world, it's based upon idiosyncrasies. So when you meet somebody in the street, or you used to walk into your bank branch, as we used to do, the branch teller or the manager knew who were, not because we went and presented our passport.
Sorry, Zia, could I just interrupt? Is there someone on the line that needs to go on mute? Can everyone just check they are? Okay, sorry, Zia, go ahead.
Right, so you brought my monologue up there, Catherine, which is a good thing. So I guess in terms of the way in which we all used to identify, so let's say we walked into a bank branch, and the bank branch manager or the teller just knew who you were, and they knew who you were from the way they probably knew who you were from 100 yards away from you having walked into the branch. And that was because of the way that you walked, the way that the clothes that you were, etc., etc. And I always use the example, I used to go to the bank branch in my hometown every Saturday morning with my mum, and holding her hand. She used to go in, she used to get her book updated with the latest numbers, and we'd walk out. And as soon as you walked through the doors, the branch manager or other people that knew her used to greet her and say, "Hello, Mrs. How are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. How's your week been?" And as I say, that wasn't a process whereby she went up to somebody and showed them her bank book or her card or something like that. It was just they naturally knew who she was. And that kind of, I think, to use one of Pedro's terms, paradigm shift, and that type of introducing that way of identifying people in the digital world is all about measuring lots of fine details, lots of what people now call behavioral analytics, but essentially it's trying to mimic the way in which our minds mathematically and mentally therefore model the real world and how they recognize and therefore identify people. And so what CallSign does and is doing is it's essentially built a lot of algorithms that are constantly evolving. These algorithms are modeling how our brains recognize people, as I say, through idiosyncrasies. I'm a big football fan, and I can tell, for example, from a long way away, that a particular player is a particular player just based upon how they amble across a pitch, for example. I don't have to see their face. I don't have to see anything like that. I don't have to hear their voice, for example. And so what we're doing is we're bringing that type of technique, that type of technology to the digital world, whereby when you interact with your mobile app or your web application, just from the way in which you think about and therefore type your username, the way in which you hold your phone, there are features that we can extract, like your wrist strength, the size of your hand, the circumference of your finger. All of these sorts of things combined with where you may be. You may be in your lounge, you may be in your office, etc., etc. And it all sounds a bit scary, and it sounds probably very big brotherish, but it's about trying to get to a way of being able to, I think, to use again one of the terms that the guys used previously, trying to get to a way in which we are able to identify people frictionlessly or in a frictionless way. And that doesn't necessarily involve having to get someone to explicitly authenticate, or if they do explicitly authenticate through a biometric or a password, this capability that we've been working with Pedro and the team on is essentially one that sits there passively and gives you even more confidence that the person that you're dealing with is indeed who they say they are. And that has benefits because it keeps the bad people out. It lets good people in quicker. It makes good people feel better because they're not being interrogated. They're walking into the branch the way they normally do, and they're being greeted with a hello, Zia, or whoever you are. And it introduces hurdles for people who are potentially bad or suspicious. So that's essentially what CallSign does. As I say, it works across web and mobile channels predominantly, but other channels as well to help identify people this way.
Thanks, Zia. It sounds really interesting. Could we explore it a bit more? I know we've had a successful proof of concept together. We've partnered together on that. So maybe Paul and Zia, could you share a bit more detail about how that went?
Yeah, I can. Maybe I'll go first. So, being a technologist, put my hands up. I always go straight to the technology, but that's actually the easy part. This solution, as well as many, you have an SDK. You plug the SDK into the solution. You call the APIs, and Bob's your uncle. You could start using that capability. The hard part is how do we make this work in our ecosystem with our customers, with our risk profiles, with our markets, and importantly, we've touched on it a few times, frictionless. Or to achieve even less friction for our customers, not cause more friction, and reduce the risk of fraud, which is the topic of this. So the technology piece was in our POC was actually quite straightforward, and the larger piece of work has been how do we achieve that frictionless experience for customers, and achieve a risk buy down at the same time. It was really a fun journey for us, because it certainly made us think outside the box to the traditional approach, which is I've got a password that I know, and I've got something in my hand that I own, to so wider thinking around risk scoring, around these additional data elements that we can achieve, and how can we use them in our processes. Zia, would you like to add on that?
Yeah, Paul. So I guess, as you say, from a technology point of view, we've done this many times before, and it's I think as Paul says, it's an SDK essentially. It's another SDK that gets plugged into the website or the mobile app, and from that perspective, you're off and running pretty quickly. It then comes down to the operational elements that I think Paul was alluding to there around how do you do this in a way whereby you begin to essentially observe your customers, and you observe them in a way that's not an explicit observation. And what I mean by that is that when you first get your new iPhone or your Samsung, whatever it is, and you've got to enroll your face or your finger or which other bit of your anatomy you're enrolling with it, you're having to do that very, very explicitly. You're having to move the phone around and show it all every angle. When we're introducing this solution, we're doing it in a way that's very passive. And what I mean by that is that when customers enroll within the app, just some of the journeys that they go through. And these are things we've been designing with Paul and Pedro's team, just the actual flow of how this needs to work in practice for the bank, because the bank has got different journeys to every other bank, as you can imagine. But when somebody enrolls for a mobile banking app, for example, can you use that enrollment process in a passive way to observe the person, and then just throughout that enrollment, so 2 or 3 screens or 4 screens, can you then have enough confidence and set enough or have taken enough data essentially to then be able to use that going forward to determine that the person that's coming back to you is indeed the genuine person. And as I mentioned earlier on, some of the things that's good to let good people in and keep bad people out, but it's also very important from a non-repudiation point of view. You know, this being able to essentially identify people in a very fine-grained way, in a high-fidelity way, means that people who may be disputing things that they actually did can't get away with it. You know, whereas today you may be able to say, for example, one of the 5 fingers that was enrolled on my phone, or one of the 5 faces that was enrolled on my phone, must have gotten into my app and did something, but it wasn't my face, and you have no way of proving it as the bank or any service provider, in fact, that sits on top of an operating system from someone like Apple or Google. And so I think what we're doing now is we're just trying to work out exactly what are the use cases, what's the enrollment process, which I think we've got nailed down because we've done that a lot in other places. But what are the use cases, to go back to one of Paul's points, within the bank, whereby this begins to naturally fit in and sit on top of or alongside existing controls, to make them, to give the bank more confidence and ultimately to make them more robust journeys, or make those more robust journeys. And so that's what we're in the process of doing at the moment. And as you can imagine, it goes from ultra low risk events or transactions like somebody just viewing their balances, all the way through to very high risk scenarios whereby somebody may be trying to change their address, or they may be trying to add a new beneficiary and transfer a lot of money out. And so we're on a journey, and that journey, as I say, we're progressing through slowly but surely.
Great, thanks Paul, thanks Ia. So sticking on the topic of POCs, but broadening that out a bit, Pedro, we work with a lot of cutting edge fintech partners, some POCs, some, much broader relationships. But what was the criteria that were considered, when we decided to partner with CallSign? Could you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, we need to understand that when it comes to selecting partners like these, we go through a process of solutioning. We have a process to identify what solutions match the sort of problems or challenges that we're trying to solve. In this case, we had a few dozens of proponents or potential candidates, let's say. We ended up with five of them. We then, those 5 were addressing 3 main things that we were trying to solve for. And for transparency, they are, number 1, document authentication. So that's one important thing that we need to solve as a financial services provider, like everybody else. We need to attest documents that are submitted to us are authentic, and they were not manipulated in any way or form. So that's one form of authentication, document authentication. That's quite important. The second piece is around biometrical authentication, and Zia did mention a few of those techniques that are available to us, like Face ID, fingerprint, and many others. And the third one is behavioral analytics, and that's the, I think the, let's say, the safeguard that we are putting on top of our own mechanisms that are already in place to secure transactions and to secure our customers. Now, the devil is always on the detail, so we had to go deep on a lot of these aspects and understand the accuracy of the solution, And of course, you know, the long-term sustainability of this product, the roadmap of this product in the next coming years. We also looked at the way the data is handled. One very important aspect to us is privacy. So we wanted to make sure that, you know, the data is handled responsibly, is handled ethically and transparently with both organizations and our customers. So CallSign actually did come through across all those criteria, and we are very happy to partner with Zia and his team on what we're doing together.
Okay, thanks, Pedro. So staying true to the title of the panel discussion, next question is going to be around trends. So Zia, perhaps you could share a little bit more on what are the latest trends that you're tracking in the financial services space, and, you know, looking to the future, what exciting offerings have you got in the pipeline to address some of those?
So I guess it's always interesting to answer that question, because unfortunately the trends in our world are always bad people trying to circumvent controls and get around systems. And so we are monitoring and looking at trends not only in the financial services sector, but other sectors as well, because generally what tends to happen is that nowadays you've got a lot of organized people, essentially, that are out there trying to do bad things. And so from a trend point of view, you know, clearly, I think, as we've all said, there's more and more happening online, digitally. That means bad people as well as good people. So just as we as good people can't go out and walk into shops, neither can they. So they are also having to evolve their business models or their ways of operating, shall I say. And so, as I say, we are looking at other industries that we work in, as well as, or sectors, shall I say, verticals, as well as financial services, and just making sure that we, as ever, stay ahead of the game and understand what people are thinking or doing, baddies in particular, in other spaces, and how that might play in the world of financial services. I think from what's coming down, so I can't say what necessarily is coming from a bad person's perspective, but we're monitoring it and we're going to keep on top of them. When it comes to what we are doing and the sorts of things that we've got in our pipeline and the roadmap, I think Pedro mentioned earlier on, you know, we've been discussing a lot of this with the broader team in the bank, especially from an R&D perspective. You know, I mentioned earlier on, essentially what this system does is it introduces human-like recognition or identification of people. And there's lots and lots of different ways in which you can recognize people through some of the methods I talked about earlier on, like taking readings from gyroscopes and accelerometers and barometers and all these other different sensors that are in smartphones. But the other interesting one, and again, this is probably going to sound a bit Star Trekky, but it's coming, is essentially measuring brainwaves. You know, so where you probably have come across organizations that are looking at or just sensing your mood, and based upon your mood, they are maybe playing or offering you music suggestions because you need to relax a little bit, or you need to turn a bit heavy metal or whatever it is. And so ultimately what those things are doing, though, is that you may have some earplugs in your ears, and there are ways in which you can essentially measure, for want of a better term, brainwaves, and you can tell then what sort of mood somebody's in. As well as measuring someone's mood, we found that type of data is also very interesting and useful in just being able to recognize somebody. And so that's the sort of thing that's coming down the line. We're also making sure that whatever we do is extensible. So, you know, when we deploy these SDKs into apps of the bank or websites and things like that, you want to make sure that it's not a massive re-engineering or reintegration job every time CallSign or someone like CallSign comes up with a new fantastical idea like this. And so we're working very, very hard to ensure that from a deployment point of view, the SDKs are extensible as can possibly be, and therefore the bank doesn't have to go through loads of pain in the future when it comes to turning on or indeed turning off features. And so that's, I guess, very high level sorts of things that we're thinking about doing.
Thank you. Fascinating stuff. And just a warning to you all now, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. If we don't get any questions, I'll be asking you about your brainwaves and what music we're going to be playing at the end. Before we get to that point, keeping it future focused. Paul, maybe you could share a bit about how we plan to scale up this partnership.
Sure. We're working with CallSign over our POC and other partners. There will be some opportunities to scale this out. Where I would like to get to for our digital channels is I know it sounds obvious, but it is the lowest risk solution with also the balance of the lowest customer friction. I thought Zia said it well. Again, traditionally, when you've got a new iPhone, you register your thumbprint, you register your face, you go through that journey again. When you register a mobile app to get a soft token, there's a journey that you go through. And how do we reduce that or simplify it? When you want to use your mobile app, often you via various levels of scoring, you need to step up to those higher risk transactions. And again, how do we simplify that flow? So it's not a binary. I need to step up to my next level of authentication, and I've got to provide my whatever it is, my biometrics or some other capability, but it's just transparent to the customer. So with CallSign and other partners, that's where we want to drive the experience for our customers, and I think we've got some really good opportunities there with partners like CallSign and others that we're working with.
Thanks, Paul. So Zia, before we look again to the chat, you mentioned earlier that you're a bit of a mental football fan, the fact that you don't even need to see their faces. And a little bird tells me that it's actually Liverpool that you're a big fan of. So I'd like to know how this relationship came about. Was it something you engineered because of the sponsorship, or was it another way?
I guess that's always a key criteria for me, Catherine. When I look through the who is CallSign going to partner with next year list, is there a Liverpool FC association? But on a serious note, I see the sort of values of the bank that actually, when it comes to Liverpool Football Club in particular, I think are very much reflected in both of these institutions, the bank and the club, for example. And some of the initiatives that the bank has had since for a long time. I mean, I've followed Liverpool for a very long time, and I won't mention the name of the company that sponsored Liverpool shirts a very, very long time ago. But I think it was one of, if not the first sponsor of Liverpool shirts, just like Standard Choice it is today. And that company is from my hometown in the north of England, and that was part of the reason why I got onto the Liverpool FC sort of journey, as well as the fact that they were very successful when I was growing up as well. And so I guess the thing that I've seen over the last 10 years or so with respect to the club and the bank is that the bank clearly has a set of ethics. Going back to one of Pedro's points earlier on, if we do this thing, or as we are scaling this thing up, we're going to do it in an ethically and a respectful way. And essentially, when you look at things like seeing is believing, or you see initiatives like Future Makers, things like this, these are all values and are all initiatives that CallSign itself actually believes in wholeheartedly and massively. And I personally believe in immensely. So giving young people opportunities. We very recently begun to sponsor something called Magic Breakfast in the UK, which is all about giving young people essentially literally a good start to the day, because they have a fullish stomach as opposed to an empty stomach. And so I think the basis upon which we are kicking this partnership off, of course, LFC helps massively, but the values of the bank and the values of CallSign, therefore, I think are very much aligned. And I think as per the last sort of renewal of the Standard Chartered and the Liverpool contract, I think we're only just beginning, and hopefully this is going to be a long and sustainable partnership because of those shared values.
Thanks, Ia. Loving the idea of magic breakfast. I skipped lunch. I could do with one now. So you'll be relieved to know that you've got a bit longer to think about your music choice, because we do have some questions. So the first one, and I'll let whoever wants to jump in answer it, but don't all rush at once. How will banks simplify client journeys for existing clients? Is it too much authentication for existing clients? I'm not sure.
Shall I take this one, or you take it, Paul?
Go ahead, Pedro.
Okay, so look, I think the way we are approaching this is with data. We're looking at transactions at various levels, the level of risk, the level of exposure, the frequency of these transactions, and of course the segments and the customers themselves who are performing these transactions, their locations, and a number of other data points. And the way we are approaching these is through a combination of various technologies. Now, CallSign is a very important technology that we will be using to screen, validate, and authorize some of these transactions. But it's not the only technology that we will be using in all transparency. So we have a combination of various mechanisms to protect the bank and our customers. And our idea and our objective really with this addition with CallSign is really to do two things, right? We need to balance risk and convenience. And the way we plan to do that is, for instance, if customers today, they need to authorize a certain transaction, let's say through a soft token PIN code or an OTP in some markets, whatever it may be, right? Imagine that tomorrow this will not be required anymore because we have done that validation behind the scenes, and the customer's journey is actually unimpacted, right? However, we have done our validation internally, and we have secured that transaction. So this is just an example of how we can go about designing these journeys to eliminate these small friction points that may be there and offer a better experience to our customers. This is how we are approaching this whole space.
Thanks, Pedro. I mean, I welcome it. I think it's actually quite a bit of friction. Sometimes it is a challenge to remember 6 digits and I have to go back 3 times. Maybe Paul, perhaps there's another question here. Maybe you could take this one. Where do you think the bank stands today in its readiness of authentication standards?
So with the sets of authentication standards that are used in the industry, Standard Chartered we have to participate. We have to meet them. We publicly we share this. We participated in open banking in Hong Kong, Bahrain. Recently, it was announced yesterday or over the weekend in Singapore, the Singapore Findex solution for financial literacy and wealth within Singapore. And again, Standard Chartered has been leading and participating in that. Those use industry standards for authentication. We'll as those standards grow and change, we'll continue to invest. But you can't not participate. Otherwise, you can't participate in this open banking or open API journey.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Zia, perhaps this one would be best answered by you. And it's, have there been any regulatory hurdles with this technology? Is it classed as personally identifiable? And like a signature, how much variation does CallSign allow for?
Yeah. a very important topic and clearly one that you can imagine, I think as I mentioned earlier on, we ask ourselves all the time. And so I think the first thing I would say on that is that just from a technical perspective, we go to great lengths, and I think Pedro mentioned this earlier on, to ensure that this system is as privacy preserving as possible. So it's gathering a lot of data. That data, whether it's how you hold the phone or whether you're at home or you're in the office, etc., we anonymize that as much as possible. So, for example, when we know you're at home, we know you're at a location. Sorry, we don't know whether that location is your house or your office. We just know it's a location we recognize for you. When you're holding the phone and we're measuring your wrist strength, we know the wrist strength is one that's recognized this person. Again, we don't take the raw sensor data and the accelerometer and the gyroscope, etc., etc. We don't pass that up to the server and let the server go and have fun with it. We anonymize it, and the server then gets a lot of relative numbers that it's processing as opposed to the absolutely correct numbers. And that, combined with, I think, just again analogies with the real world, gives us the ability to, I think, talk to sensibly or talk with sensibly and explain what it is that we're doing when we speak to regulators. So, we always say that, when you walk into a bank branch or a petrol forecourt, you take your helmet off. And the reason for that is because of safety and security. And that's been happening for many, many years in many, many territories. So you, for example, in the UK, you can't walk onto a petrol forecourt, you can't walk into a bank branch, probably even with a cap on. Now, clearly there are certain things in life that we do whereby, as an individual, we make a choice. Do we want to have anonymity, or do we want to get a service? And clearly this is in the domain of Paul and Pedro and the bank to make those decisions in terms of to what extent do we want to be examining people, for want of a better term. But what we've done as CallSign is we've tried to make it as privacy preserving as possible, whilst making the arguments, as I say, in a simple way to regulators around the world, from the States to Europe to the Middle and the Far East, which is all territories that we're deployed in for different institutions. And we, as I say, we have this very simple principle, which is that especially when you're doing something very high risk, like trying to transfer loads of money out of a bank account, you probably want to take your helmet off, or your branch manager probably wants you to take your helmet off, because that's just the way it is. And that's not to say that, take it or leave it, but there's certain things I'm sure you could do that you could kind of like mask yourself still to an extent, but there are just certain things whereby you need to be sure, I think, as you said at the beginning, Catherine, that we are dealing with who we think we're dealing with, not just because of the fact that the money might go missing and it's someone bad, but it could be the genuine customer who could come back and say, I didn't do that transaction. Prove that it was me. And if you let them mask themselves, it becomes very difficult. So, long-winded way of answering your question, absolutely, we're talking to regulators. We've explained to regulators globally that this is about consent, and it's about giving people the option to do things, hopefully, as we've all talked about, in a more convenient way, but in a way when things get serious, you identify yourself. Just like you wouldn't go into a hospital and say, I'm not going to give you my name or any of my details, but I need you to operate on my kidneys, for example. There's certain things you just have to sort of open up on, and that's the explanation.
Thank you. Paul liked that answer as well.
I do. I was just thinking I'm going to use that line next time I'm working with our internal teams. It's just like operating on my kidneys.
So I've got another question here. I think, yeah, we have got time for one more, maybe a couple more. So probably one for Pedro and or Paul. Pedro, maybe you could kick off. How many steps have been or could potentially be removed as a result of CallSign? Or is the CX gain only focused on being easier to do? For example, no need to remember a PIN number and or, no need for tied hardware for an OTP.
Perfect. Look, for us, this has to be framed in the context of certain transactions and certain, situations, right? So I cannot answer these broadly. But what I want to say is that we're looking at these not just from a behavioral analytics perspective, but from a full identity and access management point of view. Therefore, what I mean by that is that we need to identify the customer through different mechanisms and across different platforms that we use today, we have available in the bank for our customers. Customers may use different mechanisms to reach out to the bank. That may include, logging into their mobile apps. Then, next minute after that, they're calling their RM. Immediately after that, they can, decide to stop at one of our branches or go on social media or visit our website, right? Just to mention a few. So this is quite complex, but I believe, we believe we are in a good, let's say, direction when it comes to solve this identity management across these different touch points. We will use these, as I mentioned before, to eliminate some friction points. And depending on the journeys, we will be reducing the number of steps anywhere between say 15 to 20%. I think that's very much achievable. In some cases, even more. But that really depends on the type of transaction, and it depends on the context of where that is happening and which platform that is happening and which context. So we cannot just generalize on that. I hope this is helpful anyways.
Thanks, Pedro. Paul, got it covered, or did you want to add anything?
Well, Pedro answered really well. Maybe on the second part of the question over the CX gain, that's quite easy to conceptualize, right? When we do something like a high-risk transaction, adding a beneficiary or doing a large payment, our app, and actually most apps out there, ask you for a PIN again. And how can we avoid that, right? There's a few steps to adding the PIN again. You need to remember it. You need to get to that view. You need to type it in. It may not be most responsive. And rather than that, just push it through, assuming that we've verified that score based on all of these various other inputs that we have to ensure that there isn't fraud being conducted, or it's the least risk of fraud being conducted on that account. So every piece counts. Having to type in a PIN, getting it wrong, it's really annoying. And I think you opened, Catherine, yeah, you forget your PIN. Then you have to reset it, and oh my goodness. So and go back through another form of verification to be able to reset a PIN. So making that overall journey as simple as possible in something like the mobile app. But as Pedro said, it's not one channel. It's how do you interact with the bank or any financial institution overall, and ensure that we're being as risk averse to our customers and protecting their money, right, as well as their data, and while being easy to work with.
Okay, well, thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Zia, Pedro, Paul. We have about 30 seconds left, so bang on time. Thank you for that. It's been a pleasure to moderate the panel. If anyone would like to learn more, there's a demo video available. I think someone is going to post it in the chat, but you can also find it on the Standard Chartered microsite, and it's hosted in the online city on the SFF platform. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
That's it. Thank you.